Billionaire CEO's one-night stand with Maid backfires as quadruplet's pregnancy forces marriage. He murmured to his beautiful Maid, "You don't have to say anything." Her breath caught, her pulse racing as the distance between them disappeared. Her hand found his, warm and steady despite the turmoil she felt inside. The moment stretched, a fragile, suspended breath between hesitation and surrender. And then, as the rain intensified outside, their lips met. The beautiful Maid's fingers trembled as they found their way beneath the tailored fabric of Maxwell's shirt, feeling the heat of his skin against her palm. Maxwell's hands traced the curve of Elena's back, pulling her close as if trying to erase the distance time had forced between them. Neither spoke. Both knew that the night had changed everything. Hello and special welcome to Mr. Peterstone Stories, the place where every tale dives deep into the heart of love, challenges, and life's unexpected turns. Before we begin, I want to ask you something. Have you ever thought that a single moment, one night, could change everything you thought you knew about your life? That a choice made in a quiet, lonely moment might set a future in motion you never saw coming? Today's story is about just that. The kind of love that comes from the most surprising places, forcing two very different lives to collide and grow in ways neither expected. But tell me, do you believe that forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds? That trust can be rebuilt when everything seems lost? If you believe in second chances and the unexpected power of family, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and join us here, where love stories come alive with every word. Now, let's step into the world of Maxwell Harrington, a man whose life of control and success was about to be changed forever by a one-night stand he thought he'd forgotten. Maxwell Harrington was the kind of man who built his fortune with relentless focus, a billionaire CEO commanding boardrooms and shaping industries. His days were scheduled with military precision, every decision weighed and measured. Success was his language, and control his constant companion. Yet beneath the polished exterior and towering skyscrapers lay a loneliness no amount of wealth could erase. His mansion, grand and gleaming, was filled with silence more often than laughter. Elena was the quiet force behind the scenes, the maid whose steady hands cared for the house and who moved through Maxwell's world with grace and resilience. Though they occupied the same space, their lives could not have been more different. To Maxwell, she was part of the background, a presence he barely noticed. But sometimes, life breaks its own rules, and when it does, it brings together even the most unlikely souls in ways no one could foresee. That night, a storm outside mirrored the turbulence soon to burst within the walls of the mansion. A moment of vulnerability and desire, a choice neither of them expected to make, would set their worlds on a collision course that neither could escape. That single night held more than passion, it carried the weight of fate. For Maxwell, it was an escape from the strict walls he built around his heart. For Elena, it was a spark that would ignite a future filled with challenges and unexpected hope. Soon after, Elena would learn she was carrying not just one child, but quadruplets. A revelation that would turn their worlds upside down and force Maxwell to confront a reality far beyond the deals and power plays he was used to. Can two people from such different lives find common ground? Can love grow where it's least expected? And can forgiveness heal the deepest scars? Stay with us as we explore a story of passion, responsibility, and the extraordinary journey of building a family from the unlikeliest beginnings. If this story already touches your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to join us on this emotional journey. Now, let's begin. Maxwell Harrington had mastered the art of control. As the CEO of one of the world's most influential companies, his days followed a precise rhythm. Meetings, negotiations, decisions that shaped markets. Every move was calculated, every word measured. Yet beneath the sharp suits and powerful boardroom presence, Maxwell carried a solitude few ever glimpsed. His mansion was a fortress of luxury. Marble floors gleamed under the soft light filtering through vast windows. Expensive art adorned the walls, and every room reflected meticulous taste. But no amount of opulence could mask the quiet emptiness that filled the space. Elena was the heart of that mansion's quieter world. Unlike Maxwell's high-profile existence, her life was a series of unspoken sacrifices and unseen efforts. As the maid, she moved through the house with practiced grace, smoothing out the edges of a world built on perfection but lacking warmth. Her hands told stories calloused from years of hard work, but gentle in their touch. She cared for the house not just with duty, but with a devotion born of resilience. The linen she folded carried the faint scent of lavender she loved, a small rebellion against the sterility of the mansion. Maxwell rarely acknowledged her beyond a nod or a passing glance, an unspoken rule that kept their worlds distant. But Elena saw beyond the surface. She noticed the brief flicker of loneliness in his eyes when he thought no one was watching, the tension that tightened his jaw when deals went sideways, the way he lingered by the window on stormy nights, as if searching for something he had lost. Their lives were separate, divided by power and class, but the mansion's walls held their silent proximity, a fragile thread waiting to be pulled. Despite their differences, Maxwell and Elena's lives often intersected in small, quiet ways, moments barely noticed but heavy with meaning. On one late autumn morning, Maxwell found himself in the grand parlor, staring absent-mindedly out the tall windows as gray skies threatened rain. His thoughts were elsewhere, tangled in contracts and deadlines. Elena entered the room quietly, carrying a stack of freshly polished silver trays. Her footsteps were soft against the thick carpet as she moved with practiced grace, the faint scent of jasmine trailing behind her. She paused briefly to arrange the trays on the sideboard, then turned to begin dusting the ornate piano near the fireplace. Their eyes met unexpectedly. Maxwell caught a warmth in Elena's gaze. Not the cold efficiency he was accustomed to, but something genuine, a quiet understanding. For a fleeting moment, the walls of his carefully constructed life seemed to soften. Elena saw beyond the millionaire's public persona. She recognized the weight he carried, the burden of endless demands and the loneliness hidden beneath the surface. There was something fragile in him, a vulnerability that rarely surfaced in the sharp world he navigated. She wished she could reach past the barriers and touch the man beneath the suit, the man who sometimes lingered in the hallway, lost in thought, or paused by the window during storms, as if searching for something lost. Later, in the kitchen, Elena prepared Maxwell's coffee just the way he liked it, dark and strong, no sugar. She placed the cup carefully on the marble countertop, near where he usually left his briefcase. It was a small act, unnoticed yet full of care. Maxwell, already caught in the whirlwind of the day ahead, barely glanced at it. His mind raced ahead, calculating risks, anticipating meetings, and closing deals. The mansion was full of life, but he felt strangely isolated within its walls. Outside, the city buzzed with noise and movement, the normal chaos of life unfolding, but inside, Maxwell's world was one of silence and solitude. And Elena was the quiet pulse beneath it all, the steady presence in the background. On a particularly stormy evening, with rain tapping rhythmically against the tall windows, Maxwell found himself alone in the study longer than usual. The soft glow of the desk lamp cast shadows that danced across leather-bound books and polished wood. Elena entered to tidy the room, her presence bringing a calm that Maxwell hadn't realized he needed. Their eyes met again, lingering longer this time. There was an unspoken connection. A fragile thread woven between two worlds, so different yet inexplicably drawn together. Neither spoke, but the air shifted. The silence between them held a promise, a question, and a tension that both recognized. It was the beginning of something neither expected, a moment suspended between duty and desire. In the days that followed, the mansion carried the same quiet tension, an invisible thread connecting Maxwell and Elena in ways neither dared to name. Their encounters, though brief and often accidental, began to feel charged, as if the walls themselves held their secrets and whispered promises. Maxwell, a man accustomed to control, found himself caught off guard by the subtle shift. His carefully guarded exterior cracked ever so slightly when Elena was near. The usual sharpness in his gaze softened, the tension in his jaw eased. He began to notice the warmth in her presence, not as a servant, but as something more human, more real. Elena, for her part, struggled with the whirlwind of emotions stirring inside her. She had always been practical, grounded in reality. But Maxwell's rare moments of vulnerability unsettled her, stirring hopes she tried to keep buried. She reminded herself of the invisible walls between them, his world of power and hers of quiet servitude, but the pull was undeniable. Their conversations remained minimal, exchanged in fleeting glances or soft-spoken words as Elena passed through hallways or brought Maxwell his morning coffee. Yet beneath the surface, a growing tension simmered, a promise of change waiting to be awakened. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the high windows, Maxwell found himself lingering in the library longer than usual. Elena entered to straighten the books on the shelves. Their hands brushed briefly over a worn leather-bound volume, and time seemed to pause. The simple contact sent a spark that neither could ignore. "Are you well?" Maxwell asked quietly, surprising himself with the softness in his voice. Elena met his gaze steadily. "I am," she replied. "And you?" "More restless than usual," he admitted. In that shared honesty, the distance between them shrank. For a moment, there were just two people, flawed, lonely, yearning. As the weeks passed, the storm outside mirrored the growing tempest within the mansion. Rain fell harder, thunder rolled, and lightning split the sky. Inside, Maxwell and Elena found themselves drawn together by forces neither fully understood. One night, when the house was cloaked in darkness and the storm raged beyond the windows, the invisible thread snapped. It began with a glance, lingering, searching. Then a tentative touch, hesitant but full of meaning. The walls that separated them crumbled as desire and vulnerability collided. That night, the worlds of Billionaire CEO and Maid intertwined irrevocably. What started as a moment of escape became the catalyst for a journey neither could have foreseen, a journey that would test their hearts, challenge their beliefs, and ultimately redefine their lives. In the quiet aftermath of that night, the mansion seemed different, charged with a new energy neither Maxwell nor Elena could ignore. The familiar routine was fractured, replaced by stolen glances and moments heavy with unspoken questions. Maxwell awoke the next morning with a mixture of regret and something unfamiliar stirring deep inside, a flicker of warmth that clashed with his lifelong habit of detachment. The luxurious sheets beneath him felt both comforting and confining, a reminder that his carefully ordered world had been disrupted. Elena, too, carried the weight of that night. Her heart was a tumult of hope and fear, excitement and doubt. She returned to her duties with practiced composure, but inside, her mind replayed every touch, every whispered word, as if trying to understand what had truly happened between them. For days, they moved through the mansion like ghosts, avoiding direct confrontation but unable to deny the bond that had formed. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the possibility of something new, yet burdened by the unspoken consequences. Maxwell struggled to reconcile his feelings with the life he had built. He was a man used to control, to certainty, and this unexpected connection unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Yet, beneath the surface, a part of him longed for the very thing he refused to name: closeness, trust, and perhaps even love. Elena grappled with her own fears. What did this mean for her? For her future? For the fragile balance she had maintained between duty and desire? The uncertainty was terrifying, but so was the hope that maybe, just maybe, this night was the beginning of something real. As days turned into weeks, the mansion slowly began to reveal signs of change. Small acts of kindness replaced cold formality. Maxwell found himself waiting for Elena's presence, seeking her out in moments of quiet. Elena noticed the softness growing in his eyes, the way his guard lowered in her company. Their worlds, once so separate, began to overlap in subtle, beautiful ways. But the night's consequences were yet to fully reveal themselves, and fate had a way of making sure no secret stayed hidden for long. Before we dive deeper, I want to speak directly to you. What follows is the story of the night that changed everything for Maxwell and Elena, a night woven with quiet longing, intense passion, and choices that neither could have foreseen. This is the moment where their worlds, so carefully kept apart, collided in a way that would ripple through every part of their lives. It's a night filled with stolen glances, whispered confessions, and touches that speak louder than words ever could. As you listen, I want you to feel the tension, the hesitation, and the irresistible pull that drew them together. Imagine the air thick with possibility, every breath heavy with anticipation. Are you ready to step into that night with me? To see the passion, vulnerability, and raw emotion unfold in a way that will linger long after the story ends? Maxwell sat alone in his study, the weight of the day's demands pressing down on him. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet yearning stirred, a longing for connection beyond the walls he'd built around himself. Elena moved softly through the quiet mansion, unaware that the night that changed everything was just beginning, and that their lives were about to be forever altered by what was to come. Their eyes met in a fleeting moment, simple, yet charged with unspoken promises. The night stretched before them, filled with choices that would lead them into the unknown. Maxwell felt the heavy weight of exhaustion settle over him as the last remnants of daylight faded beyond the tall windows. The mansion was quiet, save for the distant patter of rain beginning to tap against the panes. His mind, usually a fortress of control, drifted toward a rare and unwelcome thought: loneliness. Tonight, something was different. The usual walls of solitude felt thinner, more permeable. His gaze fell upon the faint glow of a candle flickering in the hallway. Elena's presence felt closer than ever before. He found himself walking toward the sound of her soft footsteps echoing through the vast corridors. Their eyes met in the shadowed hallway, and in that instant, the air shifted, a subtle charge that neither had dared to acknowledge before. For a moment, words failed them. Instead, the language of glances and breathless anticipation filled the space. Maxwell's heart quickened, a rhythm out of sync with his usual composed exterior. Elena's eyes held a mixture of hesitance and boldness, hope tangled with fear. She was acutely aware of the invisible boundaries that defined their worlds. Yet tonight, those boundaries seemed fragile, as if the storm outside had loosened the constraints of their reality. Slowly, Maxwell stepped closer, his hand reaching out with deliberate care. His fingers brushed a stray lock of hair from Elena's face, the touch lingering, sending a shiver that traced down her spine. "You don't have to say anything," he murmured, his voice low and roughened by the weight of unspoken emotions. Elena's breath caught, her pulse racing as the distance between them disappeared. Her hand found his, warm and steady despite the turmoil she felt inside. The moment stretched, a fragile, suspended breath between hesitation and surrender. And then, as the rain intensified outside, their lips met. It was tentative at first, testing the waters of a desire long suppressed. But passion surged quickly beneath the surface, igniting with a force that neither could resist. Their embrace deepened, hands exploring with reverence and urgency. Every touch was a promise, every sigh a confession of feelings too long denied. The mansion's grand walls faded away, leaving only the two of them, raw, vulnerable, connected. Their kiss deepened, the world narrowing to the warmth of skin and the mingling of breath. Maxwell's hands traced the curve of Elena's back, pulling her closer as if trying to erase the distance time had forced between them. Every touch was electric, awakening sensations that had been dormant beneath years of restraint. Elena's fingers trembled as they found their way beneath the tailored fabric of Maxwell's shirt, feeling the heat of his skin against her palm. Her breath hitched, a mix of longing and fear swirling within her chest. She knew this night could unravel everything they both tried to keep hidden, yet the pull was irresistible. The scent of rain mingled with the subtle fragrance of Elena's skin, a heady combination that intoxicated Maxwell. His usual control slipped, replaced by the raw need to hold, to touch, to claim this fleeting moment of connection. Their movements became a dance, slow and deliberate at first, savoring each sensation. Elena's hands roamed freely, exploring the planes of Maxwell's chest, the taut muscles beneath his skin. His touch, rougher but tender, traced the lines of her neck and shoulders, igniting a trail of fire in its wake. The room seemed to shrink. The only sounds were the soft sighs and whispered names they exchanged in the dark. Shadows played across their bodies, draping the scene in intimacy and secrecy. Maxwell's lips found the sensitive hollow beneath Elena's ear, eliciting a soft gasp that sent a thrill coursing through him. He pressed closer, their bodies aligned as if made to fit together despite the worlds that sought to keep them apart. Clothes became an obstacle swiftly removed, barriers falling away to reveal bare skin and vulnerable hearts. Every inch of contact was electric, the press of a hand, the brush of fingertips, the heat of a breath against heated flesh. Elena's skin flushed under his touch, every nerve alive with anticipation and desire. She surrendered to the sensation, allowing herself to be carried away by the wave of emotion and physical longing. Maxwell's hands cupped her face, thumbs tracing along her cheekbones as if memorizing the contours he had admired from afar. Their eyes locked, a silent conversation passing between them, of trust, fear, and the hope for something more. The night deepened around them, but inside that room, time stood still. They moved together with a rhythm born of desperation and need, each moment more urgent than the last. Whispers of affection mingled with gasps and moans, creating a symphony of intimacy that echoed softly against the walls. The passion they shared was fierce yet tender, a contradiction that only heightened the intensity. As they reached the peak of their union, every barrier dissolved. The world beyond that room ceased to exist. Only the connection between them mattered. When at last they lay tangled in the aftermath, hearts pounding and bodies slick with sweat, silence settled between them. It was not the quiet of peace, but of something fragile and unspoken. Neither spoke. Both knew that the night had changed everything forever. The first light of dawn filtered softly through the curtains, casting a pale glow over the room where Maxwell and Elena lay entwined. The passion of the night before had given way to a quiet stillness, but the air remained charged with unspoken words and unsettled emotions. Maxwell's fingers traced lazy circles on Elena's bare shoulder, his breath steady but his mind racing. The control he wielded so effortlessly in the boardroom felt distant here, replaced by a vulnerability he rarely allowed himself to feel. Elena shifted slightly, her head resting against his chest. She could hear the steady beat of his heart, a comforting rhythm that clashed with the turmoil inside her own. Neither spoke. The silence was thick, filled with the weight of what had passed and the uncertainty of what might come next. Maxwell finally broke the quiet, his voice low and hesitant. "This changes everything," he said, almost to himself. Elena's eyes fluttered open, meeting his gaze with a mix of hope and fear. "I know," she whispered. For a long moment, they simply held each other, the world outside forgotten. But beneath the warmth and closeness lay a gnawing question neither dared voice aloud. What now? Both felt the fragile threads of connection they had woven during the night, yet also the barriers that years of circumstance and societal expectation had built between them. Maxwell's mind raced through the consequences, the risks to his reputation, the complications of their vastly different lives. Yet the thought of walking away, of pretending the night had never happened, felt unbearable. Elena wrestled with her own doubts. Was this a fleeting moment, a lapse in the rules she'd lived by? Or was it the start of something real, a chance at a life she had only dared to dream of? The morning light grew stronger, illuminating the quiet tension that filled the room. They both knew the night was behind them, but its impact was just beginning. The sun climbed higher, its warm light spilling through the curtains and casting a gentle glow over the quiet room. Yet for Maxwell and Elena, the brightness did little to ease the weight settling heavily in their chests. They lay tangled beneath the sheets, the warmth between their bodies a sharp contrast to the chill of uncertainty that crept in with the morning air. Maxwell stared at the ceiling, mind racing with questions that had no easy answers. The night had shattered the walls he had so carefully built around himself. It had forced him to confront a vulnerability he had long buried beneath ambition and success. Could he face the consequences of this night? Was he ready to challenge the life he had crafted with such care for something so unpredictable? Elena turned her head slowly, watching Maxwell with eyes full of unspoken emotion. Her heart beat with hope, fragile yet fierce, but shadows of fear lingered. What would this mean for her? For the delicate balance of her life that had been so carefully maintained, the silence stretched between them, a space both comforting and suffocating. Breaking it, Maxwell finally spoke, his voice rough but honest. "We can't pretend this never happened. Not anymore." Elena nodded, biting her lip as tears threatened to spill. "I don't want to pretend either." In that moment, the truth between them was undeniable. The night was more than just a fleeting moment. It was a turning point. A beginning they both feared and desperately needed. But alongside the tender connection came the gnawing question neither could avoid. How would their worlds survive the upheaval? To you listening now, I ask, have you ever stood at a crossroads, torn between what your heart demands and what your mind warns against? Have you ever felt the sting of knowing that one choice could change everything? Maxwell and Elena's story is that choice, messy, complicated, filled with longing and fear. It's a reminder that love is rarely simple, and sometimes the nights that change us most are the ones we least expect. Think about the moments in your own life where passion and uncertainty collide. How do you face the unknown? What risks are worth taking for a chance at something real? If this story stirs something in you, share your thoughts below. Let's talk about the power of moments that defy logic and the courage it takes to embrace them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for what comes next, because Maxwell and Elena's journey is just beginning, and the road ahead promises both challenge and hope. Before we continue, let me ask you something important. Have you ever received news so unexpected, so overwhelming, that it changed everything you thought your future held? A moment that forced you to face a reality you never imagined? Elena's story is about that kind of moment. One filled with shock, fear, and a growing sense of responsibility that no one could prepare her for. As we follow her journey through this unthinkable news, think about what you would do if your life suddenly shifted beneath your feet. Would you rise to the challenge, or would fear make you run? If you're ready, let's continue. The days that followed the night Maxwell and Elena shared passed in a blur of conflicting emotions for her. At first, she tried to focus on her daily routine, tidying the mansion, caring for the home, and pushing away the growing unease deep inside. But her body began to betray her. It started with fatigue that settled into her bones like a heavy fog. She brushed off the sudden waves of nausea as nothing more than exhaustion from long days and restless nights. Yet, beneath the surface, a quiet whisper of possibility began to take root, a small, persistent hope tinged with fear. Elena found herself waking earlier than usual, her mind tangled in questions she dared not voice. Could it be? Was there a chance she carried something that would change everything? One morning, after a restless night, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. Her eyes looked tired, but there was something new, a fragile strength born from uncertainty. With shaking hands, she reached for the small box she had hidden in her dresser, a pregnancy test she bought in secret days ago. The weight of the moment pressed down on her as she peeled back the wrapper, revealing the slender stick. Her breath caught in her throat as she followed the instructions carefully, placing it on the counter and waiting. Time stretched thin, each second filled with a mix of hope and dread. The silence around her was deafening. Then, slowly, unmistakably, two pink lines appeared. A rush of emotions flooded through her. Shock, disbelief, and a strange sense of wonder all at once. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, blurring the small bathroom as she sank onto the cold tile floor. She cradled the test in her hands, the reality settling in. She was pregnant, but the question that followed was overwhelming. What next? Would Maxwell be ready for this? Could she face the storm alone? The days until her appointment at the clinic were a tumultuous blend of fear and fragile hope. Every quiet moment was filled with questions and doubts, yet beneath it all was a fierce determination to find the truth and protect whatever future lay ahead. The clinic was a stark contrast to the warmth of the mansion, a place of sterile lights and hushed voices. Elena sat in the waiting room, heart pounding, as other patients whispered in low tones or wiped tears from their eyes. When the technician finally called her in, Elena felt a tremor of nerves. The soft hum of the ultrasound machine filled the room as the doctor explained the process gently, his calm demeanor offering a sliver of comfort. As the probe moved over her abdomen, the screen flickered to life, revealing the first image of the tiny heartbeats she could barely comprehend. And then came the words that shattered and reshaped her world. You're expecting quadruplets. For separate heartbeats, each a fragile spark of life. Elena's breath caught, tears spilling freely as she stared at the screen. For lives growing inside her, a miracle wrapped in an immense, daunting responsibility. Her mind raced. How could she carry this secret alone? How would Maxwell react? How would this change everything between them? Back at the mansion, Maxwell was oblivious to the storm brewing in Elena's life. His world was a whirlwind of meetings, calls, and decisions, each one demanding his full attention. The city skyline outside his office window glittered with promise and power, but inside, the pressure was mounting. Despite his success, a quiet unrest tugged at him. The weight of unspoken truths, the memory of Elena's glance, and the growing distance between them haunted his thoughts. The days stretched on, their secret hanging heavy in the air, threatening to unravel with every passing moment. Elena left the clinic in a daze, the weight of the news pressing heavily on her shoulders. Each step back to the mansion felt like crossing an invisible line, a threshold into a future she hadn't dared imagine until now. The cool autumn air did little to calm the storm inside her heart. As she walked through the grand entrance, the familiar walls of the mansion seemed both a refuge and a cage. She longed for solace, but feared the questions that might come with the truth she carried. Her footsteps echoed softly on the marble floors, each one a reminder that the life she had known was about to shift irrevocably. In the quiet of her small room, Elena allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. Tears spilled freely as she cradled her growing belly, feeling the fragile promise within. The responsibility was daunting, for lives depended on her strength, on her courage. She was no stranger to hardship, but this was a journey unlike any she had faced. Her mind raced with thoughts of Maxwell. Would he embrace this unexpected future? Or would the man she glimpsed in rare moments of tenderness retreat behind the walls of control he had built? Meanwhile, high above the city in his sleek office, Maxwell wrestled with his own turmoil. The empire he had built with precision and power felt suddenly fragile, as if a single misstep could send it crumbling. His phone buzzed relentlessly, but his attention wavered, pulled back to thoughts of Elena and the night that refused to fade. He was a man used to certainty, to control, but now, uncertainty hovered like a shadow. The secret they shared was no longer a whispered thought, but a growing force demanding reckoning. Their worlds, once carefully kept apart, were drawing inexorably closer, caught in a delicate dance of hope and fear. Elena's resolve hardened with each passing day. She began to prepare, not just for the physical challenges ahead, but for the emotional storms they would face. The mansion, once a place of routine and order, now held the weight of secrets and possibilities. Maxwell, too, sensed the shifting tides. Behind his calm exterior, a battle raged between fear and responsibility, between the life he knew and the unknown path before him. To you listening now, when faced with a truth that could change everything, where do you find the courage to stand firm? What does it take to embrace a future you never planned for? Though neither Maxwell nor Elena had yet spoken of that night, its shadow stretched long across their days. Maxwell moved through the halls of power with his usual assuredness, yet beneath the polished veneer, a quiet restlessness unsettled him. His thoughts returned often to Elena, the woman whose presence lingered in his mind, softening the edges of his carefully constructed world. In meetings, his mind occasionally drifted, caught by memories he did not dare fully examine. The brush of her hand, the warmth of her gaze, the fragile vulnerability he glimpsed in her eyes, all clashed with the man he had always been, controlled, detached, unwavering. He found himself questioning in moments of rare solitude whether a single night of surrender could tip the scales of his life. The answer eluded him, wrapped in a mix of denial and dawning awareness. Elena, meanwhile, carried her own storm. The secret growing within her was no longer a quiet hope, but a burgeoning reality that demanded her strength. Fear mingled with determination as she faced the path ahead, uncertain yet resolute. She moved through the mansion with a newfound purpose, each step weighted by the knowledge of the life she carried and the changes to come. The routine that once grounded her now felt fragile, like a delicate thread stretched taut. Between them, silence held a tension deeper than words. Both sensed the unspoken truth pressing close, yet neither dared to speak it aloud. To you listening, I ask, when the future tilts unexpectedly, how do you find balance? How do you carry the weight of secrets that could change everything? Their journey is poised at a crossroads, a moment pregnant with possibility and peril. What lies ahead will test their courage, their hearts, and the fragile ties that bind them. The days that followed felt heavier, as if the very air around Maxwell thickened with unspoken fears. The secret he carried was no longer confined to whispered thoughts in quiet moments. It was a shadow looming over every decision, every handshake, every meeting. Maxwell moved through his world of power and prestige with a careful smile, but inside, turmoil churned relentlessly. The empire he had built with ruthless precision suddenly seemed vulnerable, fragile in the face of a truth he could neither deny nor escape. Rumors, subtle at first, began to weave their way through his corporate circles. A glance here, a hushed conversation there. Whispers hinting at scandal, at cracks in the carefully polished facade. Maxwell's trusted allies grew distant, eyes flickering with questions he dared not answer. Meanwhile, Elena found strength she hadn't known she possessed. The fear that once threatened to consume her was tempered by a fierce resolve. No longer willing to be silent, she sought out Maxwell, not as the untouchable billionaire, but as the man who shared her secret, her future. Their confrontation unfolded in the quiet intimacy of a room away from prying eyes. Words poured out, raw, honest, and laced with the subtle tension of unspoken desire. Elena demanded acknowledgement, not just of their unborn children, but of the bond forged in that night neither could forget. Maxwell, faced with the undeniable truth, struggled between the man he had been and the man he could become. The walls he'd built around his heart began to crumble, revealing a vulnerability as potent as their passion. To you listening now, has honesty ever felt like a double-edged sword? Can revealing the truth be the first step toward healing, or does it sometimes cut too deep? Share your thoughts below as we follow Maxwell and Elena's journey through trust, love, and redemption. Maxwell sat behind his massive mahogany desk. The city skyline stretched out before him like a sea of flickering lights. On the surface, he was the embodiment of control, immovable, unshakable. Yet inside, a tempest brewed. Each passing day chipped away at his carefully constructed armor. The secret he carried weighed heavier with every phone call, every board meeting where glances lingered just a moment too long. He could almost hear the whispers weaving through the corridors of power, faint but persistent. In the world Maxwell commanded, reputation was currency. One misstep, one hint of scandal, could unravel decades of work. The thought clawed at him, filling his nights with restless shadows. Despite the outward calm, his mind was a battlefield. Images of Elena's face flickered behind his eyes, the vulnerability, the strength, the secret they shared. The night that had ignited a fire between them now threatened to consume all he had built. Around him, colleagues began to shift subtly. Invitations to exclusive events slowed, friendly texts became terse, and the faintest hints of doubt crept into conversations he could not overhear but felt keenly. The air was thick with suspicion, the kind that could poison alliances. Maxwell knew denial would not shield him forever. The longer he avoided the inevitable, the sharper the fall might be. Meanwhile, Elena found herself growing bolder. The fear that once shackled her voice softened, replaced by a resolve forged in the quiet fires of uncertainty and love. She no longer wished to be a silent shadow in Maxwell's world. Her decision to confront him was born of necessity, a demand not only for acknowledgement of their shared past, but for a future where their unborn children would not be secrets hidden in the dark. That confrontation was a collision of worlds. In a secluded room, away from prying eyes and whispered judgments, they faced each other, two souls entwined by passion and fear. Words spilled forth, raw and unfiltered. Elena's voice trembled with emotion as she laid bare her hopes and fears, her demand for honesty piercing the protective walls Maxwell had built. For his part, Maxwell stood at a precipice. The man who had ruled with precision now wrestled with vulnerability, the need for control clashing with the stirring of genuine connection. Between them, the air was charged, not just with the echoes of past desire, but with the fragile hope for redemption and trust. Elena's footsteps echoed softly down the grand corridor as she approached Maxwell's study, her heart hammering against her ribs with a mix of resolve and apprehension. The mansion, which once felt like a sanctuary, now seemed charged with a tension she could no longer ignore. Each step felt heavier than the last, burdened by the weight of the secret she carried, one that threatened to change everything. The polished wood of the door was cool beneath her trembling hand as she pushed it open quietly. Inside, Maxwell stood by the window, the city lights casting a cold glow on his sharp silhouette. His posture was tense, shoulders squared against an invisible storm. When he turned, his gaze met hers, sharp, unreadable, but beneath it, a flicker of vulnerability. "Elena," he greeted, voice low but steady. "What's on your mind?" She took a breath, steadying herself. "We need to talk. About the night we shared, and what came after." His eyes darkened slightly, a flash of conflict crossing his features. "You mean?" "Yes," she said, stepping forward with purpose. "I'm carrying your children. Quadruplets." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the city beyond the windows. Maxwell's breath hitched, his mind racing to grasp the enormity of her words. "For," he repeated, voice barely above a whisper, "for lives inside you." Elena nodded, eyes shining with unshed tears. "Yes, and they're ours, whether you choose to accept it or not." Maxwell turned away, pacing the room, fingers running through his hair in frustration. "This changes everything. My company, my life, my reputation. How am I supposed to handle this?" Elena's gaze softened, but her voice remained firm. "We don't have the luxury to pretend this isn't real anymore. I'm not just the maid, Maxwell. I'm the mother of your children. I need you to see me. To see us." He stopped, facing her again, the conflict evident in his eyes. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Every move I make is scrutinized. One scandal could destroy everything. But hiding won't protect us," Elena said, stepping closer, her hand reaching out to rest gently on his arm. The warmth of her touch was a lifeline. "We have to face this together." Maxwell's eyes searched hers, vulnerability softening his usual hardness. "I'm scared. Scared of losing control, scared of losing you." Tears spilled from Elena's eyes as she closed the distance, their lips meeting in a kiss that was at once desperate and tender. The passion between them was a silent confession, a promise of hope amidst chaos. When they pulled apart, their foreheads pressed together, breaths mingling. "We can't change the past," Maxwell murmured. "But maybe we can build a future." Elena nodded, fragile hope blossoming in her heart. Together. The room was heavy with the weight of what was to come, but in that moment, they held on to each other, a fragile yet unbreakable bond forged in truth and desire. The days that followed were filled with an undercurrent of unease. Maxwell returned to his public life with practiced composure, but beneath the surface, a growing storm brewed. The secret he and Elena shared was like a fragile thread stretched taut. Any wrong move could snap it and send everything crashing down. In the glossy towers of the corporate world, where deals were made over whispered conversations and champagne toasts, subtle changes began to take root. Eyes lingered longer than usual when Maxwell entered a room. Colleagues exchanged fleeting glances, their smiles masking growing curiosity. Whispers followed him down marble halls. Rumors carried on the wind, fragmentary and cruel. Maxwell felt the shifting tide. Invitations he once received without question now arrived with hesitation. Allies who had stood firmly by his side grew distant, their words carefully measured, their loyalty uncertain. Meanwhile, Elena's world had begun to transform in quiet but profound ways. The weight of her secret no longer threatened to crush her. Instead, it steeled her resolve. She refused to be sidelined, a mere shadow in Maxwell's empire. One evening, in the privacy of the mansion's library, Elena gathered the courage that had been building inside her for weeks. The air between them was thick with anticipation and unspoken questions. "Maxwell," she said, voice steady yet filled with emotion, "we can't keep hiding from this. Our children deserve more than whispers and silence." His eyes, tired but intense, met hers. "I know," he replied, voice low. "But the world we live in isn't kind to secrets like ours." Elena stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. "Then let's be the ones to take control. Together." Their conversation deepened, peeling back layers of fear, regret, and hope. The tension between them was palpable, charged not only with the weight of their shared truth but with the lingering embers of desire that had never fully faded. Maxwell's hand found Elena's, fingers intertwining as they sought comfort and strength in each other. "I'm scared," he confessed. "Not just for myself, but for us." Elena's gaze softened. "Fear is natural, but love is stronger." Outside the mansion, the world moved on, but within those walls, a battle raged, between silence and truth, fear and courage, past mistakes and future promises. The fragile secret that Maxwell and Elena guarded so carefully was no longer theirs alone to keep. Whispers that had once skirted the edges of rumor now spilled into the open, carried by eager tongues and flashing cameras. What began as hushed conversations in boardrooms and elite gatherings soon erupted into a media frenzy. Headlines splashed across tabloids, speculating on the mysterious pregnancy and the identity of the father. Social media buzzed with speculation, judgment, and scandal. Maxwell, once untouchable in the eyes of the public, found himself thrust into an unforgiving spotlight. The polished image he had cultivated for years began to crack under the weight of exposure. In press conferences and interviews, Maxwell maintained a composed, unshakable facade. But behind closed doors, the relentless scrutiny took its toll. Nights were sleepless, filled with regret and a gnawing fear for the future of his empire and the woman and children at its center. Elena watched from the sidelines, her own turmoil mirrored in the tension etched on Maxwell's face. Yet in the midst of chaos, their bond deepened, forged by shared struggle and an unspoken promise to face whatever came next together. In stolen moments, away from prying eyes, their connection grew more tender, more profound. The passion that had once been reckless now matured into a steady flame of commitment and trust. As the news broke, the city buzzed with gossip and speculation. Journalists camped outside Maxwell's towering office building, their cameras flashing relentlessly, eager for a glimpse of the man whose private life had become headline news. The scandal cut deeper than any corporate battle Maxwell had faced. This was personal, raw, and inescapable. At the center of the storm, Maxwell held firm in public. His carefully crafted statements were measured and precise, projecting control even as his world felt like it was unraveling beneath him. But in the privacy of his home, the weight of public scrutiny pressed down relentlessly. Nights stretched into mornings as Maxwell wrestled with regret and doubt. The empire he had spent years building now seemed fragile. every decision scrutinized, every alliance tested. Yet even in his darkest moments, thoughts of Elena and their unborn children anchored him. Elena, meanwhile, faced the storm with quiet strength. The whispers and stares in social circles were sharp, but she refused to be broken. Each day, she grew more certain that their family, unconventional and unexpected, was worth fighting for. In the shelter of their private moments, Maxwell and Elena found solace in each other. The passion between them, once fiery and impulsive, evolved into a deep, comforting connection. One evening, as rain drummed softly against the windows, they sat together in the mansion's library, wrapped in the warmth of a shared blanket. Maxwell reached for Elena's hand, his touch gentle but full of meaning. "We'll get through this," he murmured. Together. Elena squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with trust and hope. "I believe that too." Their kisses were slower now, filled with promise and tenderness, a reflection of the maturity their relationship had gained through hardship. Though the world outside continued to spin with scandal and speculation, within those walls, Maxwell and Elena forged a new kind of intimacy, one built on honesty, resilience, and unwavering commitment. Maxwell's public image, once untouchable, now teetered precariously on the edge. Tabloid headlines screamed accusations and insinuations, each one a fresh wound to his carefully constructed reputation. Late-night calls from anxious board members reminded him that loyalty was as fragile as the secrets they tried to keep hidden. Every public appearance became a gauntlet, every smile strained beneath the weight of scrutiny. Behind the facade, Maxwell wrestled with his own sense of failure. Pride battled with remorse as he pondered how a single night, once thought to be forgotten, could unravel the life he had meticulously built. The empire he commanded with such authority now seemed vulnerable, shadowed by doubts not just from the outside world, but from within himself. Elena watched the storm from a different vantage point. Though shielded from the harsh glare of the media, she was not immune to the whispers that crept into their circle. Yet, instead of succumbing to fear, she found strength in the unexpected. Their shared secret bound them together in a way that transcended status and circumstance. It was in this crucible of challenge that their love deepened and matured. In quiet moments, away from the chaos, their connection blossomed. Maxwell's touches were no longer hurried or furtive but deliberate and tender, conveying a promise of steadfastness. Elena's presence became his refuge, a reminder of what truly mattered amid the relentless tide of public opinion. One night, as thunder rumbled softly in the distance, Maxwell and Elena found themselves alone in the vast mansion, the storm outside mirroring the turmoil within. They moved closer, hands entwined, drawing strength from each other's resolve. Their kiss was a vow, not just of passion, but of commitment and hope in the face of uncertainty. This was no longer just a story of scandal. It was a testament to resilience, trust, and the power of love to withstand even the harshest storms. The days that followed were a whirlwind of relentless headlines and invasive questions. News crews appeared outside the mansion gates, their cameras flashing as they sought to capture any glimpse of the couple at the heart of the storm. Every whispered rumor and half-truth became fuel for the media fire, spreading rapidly across social platforms and news outlets alike. Maxwell faced it all with a steely exterior. In public, he was the consummate professional, calm, measured, and unyielding. His carefully rehearsed statements reassured investors and stakeholders, but behind closed doors, the weight of exposure was crushing. The empire he had built was under siege, and his private life was the battleground. Elena, too, grappled with the fallout. The once quiet Maid found herself thrust unwillingly into the spotlight. Social circles that had once ignored her now whispered behind closed doors. Yet through it all, her resolve never wavered. She drew strength from the life growing inside her and the man beside her, even as the world seemed determined to tear them apart. In the sanctuary of their shared moments, Maxwell and Elena found a refuge from the chaos. Their intimacy deepened, not just physically but emotionally. The passion that had sparked their union matured into a steady flame, fueled by mutual understanding and unspoken promises. One evening, nestled beside the fire in the mansion's study, Maxwell traced gentle patterns on Elena's hand. "No matter what they say," he murmured, "we face it together. Our family is real, and it's ours." Elena smiled softly, her eyes reflecting a mix of love and determination. "We'll prove them wrong. Together." Their embrace lingered, a quiet testament to a bond forged in adversity and strengthened by hope. As the public uproar swelled, Maxwell found himself trapped between two worlds, the relentless demands of his empire and the intimate, fragile reality of his private life. Each board meeting was shadowed by the fear that his personal scandal might tip the balance against him. The pressure was suffocating, yet Elena's quiet strength offered a lifeline. Their relationship, tested by the glare of the media and whispers behind closed doors, grew deeper and more nuanced. Passion gave way to partnership, desire intertwined with trust. In stolen moments, away from the chaos, they shared dreams and fears, planning a future that seemed both daunting and necessary. Maxwell often caught himself watching Elena with a newfound appreciation, not just as the woman who carried his children, but as his equal, his confidant. She had become his anchor in a stormy sea, grounding him when everything else threatened to slip away. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rumbled softly outside, Maxwell took Elena's hand in his. "Whatever comes," he said firmly, "we face it side by side. No more hiding, no more running." Elena met his gaze, her resolve mirrored in his eyes. "Together," she whispered. Their kiss was a quiet declaration, a promise sealed not just in passion but in unwavering commitment. The outside world showed no mercy. Gossip columns turned into scandal sheets overnight, fueling relentless speculation about Maxwell's personal life and the looming arrival of his quadruplets. The boardroom that once echoed with confident voices now whispered uncertainty, alliances shifted, and some of Maxwell's closest associates began to distance themselves, wary of the storm threatening his empire. Shareholders grew restless, stock prices wavered, and the media's spotlight grew harsher. Every public appearance was dissected, every interview scrutinized for signs of weakness or scandal. Maxwell's image as a composed, invincible CEO was under siege, and with it, the foundation of his empire trembled. Elena, too, faced the brunt of societal judgment. The discreet world she once inhabited was invaded by gossip and sideways glances. Friends she had trusted kept their distance, and whispers followed her like shadows. Yet, amid the rising tide of criticism, Elena stood resolute. Her love for Maxwell and their children a shield against the judgment. Within the mansion, the pressure was palpable. Every interaction between Maxwell and Elena carried the weight of the world outside, but also the fierce determination to protect their family at all costs. They learned to navigate the delicate balance between public scrutiny and private sanctuary. Their renewed intimacy became a source of strength. In the quiet corners of their home, away from prying eyes and flashing cameras, they reaffirmed their commitment, not just as lovers, but as partners ready to face the future together, no matter the cost. The relentless media storm was unyielding. Tabloids and online outlets exploded with sensational headlines about Maxwell Harrington's scandal, speculating on everything from the legitimacy of his heirs to whispered rumors about the stability of his empire. Paparazzi camps set up around the mansion and corporate headquarters, their cameras hunting for any sign of weakness. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Maxwell's executive team, once unwavering in their loyalty, exchanged wary glances behind closed doors. Whispers of doubt crept into conversations, concerns about the impact of the scandal on shareholder confidence mounting with every passing day. Some suggested Maxwell step back temporarily to let the storm pass. Others argued fiercely that his presence was essential to steady the company's course. Maxwell bore the brunt of this pressure with a stoicism born of experience, but it came at a cost. Every decision felt heavier, every meeting a test not just of strategy but of his ability to project strength despite the chaos threatening to consume him. He was no stranger to adversity, but this was different, this was personal. At home, the mansion was both a refuge and battleground. Elena moved with a quiet determination, balancing the demands of her pregnancy with the need to support Maxwell's fragile spirit. The glances exchanged between them spoke volumes, unspoken promises to face the coming storm together. One evening, after a particularly grueling day marked by sharp questions and veiled threats from board members, Maxwell retreated to their private study. Elena followed, her presence a balm to his frayed nerves. Without words, they found each other. Touch replacing speech, comfort replacing doubt. Their intimacy had evolved. No longer the reckless passion of their first encounters, it was a steady flame, warm, reassuring, and resilient. In those moments, surrounded by the quiet strength of their connection, Maxwell found the courage to face the challenges ahead. Yet the public's appetite for scandal was insatiable. Leaks from within the company, anonymous tips to the press, and social media speculation fueled a firestorm that showed no sign of abating. Maxwell's every move was scrutinized, every misstep magnified. Through it all, Elena remained his steadfast ally. She confronted whispers with quiet dignity, her resolve unwavering even as the world pressed in. Their shared journey, once a fragile secret, had become a testament to their strength and commitment. As the chapter of public scandal and private reckoning drew to a close, Maxwell and Elena stood united, not as isolated individuals, but as a family forged in adversity. Their love, tempered by trial, promised a future where honesty, trust, and unwavering support would be their guiding light. Maxwell didn't sleep that night. After Elena left the room, her words still hanging in the air like smoke, he stood by the tall windows for hours, staring into the dark skyline. The city lights blinked indifferently back at him, but inside, something had cracked open. He thought about her hands, the way they shook when she spoke, even as her voice stayed strong. He thought about the word walk, how she said it not as a threat, but as a truth. If he didn't choose this family, if he didn't show up fully, she would leave. Not because she didn't love him, but because she loved herself and the lies inside her enough to walk away from anything less than certainty. And for once, Maxwell allowed himself to feel fear not of scandal, but of loss. He spent the next morning in silence. The office called, messages stacked in his inbox, a lunch meeting waited downtown, but he ignored them all. Instead, he sat at the piano in the drawing room, hands still, the house impossibly quiet. It was in that silence he realized how much of his life had been about performing, for investors, the press, even himself. He had built an empire to prove he was enough, to shield himself from ever needing anyone. But now, needing someone wasn't a weakness. It was the most honest thing he'd ever felt. When he found Elena that afternoon in the garden, her favorite place, she was sitting on the bench under the magnolia tree, a book in her lap, though she wasn't reading. He approached slowly. She looked up, her expression guarded but calm. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Maxwell said, voice low. Elena waited. He sat beside her, eyes not on the book or her belly, but her face. "I've spent most of my life chasing control. I thought that was strength. But strength is you, Elena. It's what you did last night. It's choosing love, even if it scares you." Her shoulders softened. "I'm choosing this," he said. "I'm choosing you. All of you." She blinked, and her breath caught. "You're sure?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." She nodded slowly, emotion threatening her composure. And when she leaned into his arms, something in both of them settled. The days that followed moved with a calm clarity neither of them had expected. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic scenes. Just quiet decisions. Small gestures. A steady unraveling of the emotional walls they had spent so long constructing. Maxwell began to show up differently. He didn't try to fix everything with gifts or apologies. He stayed. He asked questions. He listened. And Elena let him in. Not because she needed rescuing, but because he'd finally earned the right to stand beside her. One afternoon, sitting side by side on the edge of the nursery they were preparing together, Maxwell turned to her with a softness in his eyes she had only glimpsed before. He held her hand, pressed his lips to her knuckles, and said, "Let's get married. Not to fix anything. Not to silence the noise. But because I want to spend my life proving that I choose this. Every day." Elena's reply was simple. Yes. No long silence. No hesitation. Just yes. The wedding was intimate. Not because they lacked people in their lives, but because they were intentional about who they let in. Family. A few close friends. A couple of allies who had stood firm when others had faded into the background. Elena wore a gown of simple elegance, soft silk that hugged her shape and flowed like water at her feet. Her belly was rounded beneath the fabric, the life within her both visible and radiant. Maxwell waited for her at the altar, his tailored suit crisp, his hands clasped in front of him not from nervousness, but reverence. The ceremony was held in the garden at sunset. String lights draped across archways, the soft rustle of leaves whispering through the air as the last gold of the sun faded behind them. When Elena walked down the aisle, every step echoed years of silent sacrifice, private tears, and hard-earned joy. Maxwell's eyes never left her. Their vows were not perfect poetry. They didn't try to be. They were real. "I vow to never choose image over truth again," Maxwell said. "To put you first, and to never let fear speak louder than love." Elena, her voice quiet but unwavering, replied, "I vow to be your home." Your balance when the world tilts. Your clarity when you forget what matters. When they kissed, it wasn't a performance. It was a moment sealed between two people who had seen each other at their most exposed and still chose one another without hesitation. Life didn't suddenly become easy. There were still eyes on them, still skeptics waiting for the fairy tale to fall apart. The press found new ways to dig into their story. Shareholders still demanded performance. The mansion still echoed sometimes with the weight of its past. But within the walls of their home, there was laughter, morning kisses, ultrasound appointments filled with wonder and nerves, late-night conversations about names and nursery colors, dinner shared in silence, not from discomfort, but peace. Maxwell took a step back from the limelight, not out of defeat, but out of choice. He learned to delegate, to prioritize, to make space for bedtime stories and midnight cravings and quiet Sundays that had nothing to do with headlines. Elena embraced motherhood with a quiet grace, but never let it erase her identity. She was not just a mother, not just a wife. She was still her own force, still the woman who had drawn a line in the sand and refused to be anything less than fully loved. They fought sometimes. They got tired. But love was not a question anymore. It was a practice, daily, deliberate, and deeply alive. Their story doesn't end here. It evolves. From scandal to sincerity. From doubt to devotion. And if you followed them this far, maybe you understand now. Real love doesn't come without risk. It demands truth. It demands change. But in return, it gives something unshakable. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment. What does commitment look like to you? And how do you define a love worth choosing? Make sure you subscribe and follow for more stories just like this, because love like this deserves to be told. And as their story turns a page, one thing remains clear: love isn't just about grand gestures. It's about the quiet choices, the uncomfortable truths, the courage to stay when leaving would be easier, and the willingness to begin again, even when the world is still watching. Because love, real love, isn't flawless, but it's always worth fighting for. If you felt something while watching this story, don't just scroll away. Tap that like button, share this with someone who believes in second chances, and drop a comment below. What does real commitment look like to you? And more importantly, what would you do for love? Subscribe for more stories that stir, challenge, and stay with you. Until next time, stay brave, stay soft, and keep choosing love.